Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Let's save some breath for the incumbent President Biden and a second listener letter. Irvin says he's 89 years old, basically a Republican, but anti-Trump. And he says, my wife is in a nursing home with Alzheimer's. At the outset of the disease, we noticed only small changes. It took us a long time to recognize how serious her problems were. Regarding President Biden, I think he's showing the same type of signs that my wife was showing. In my opinion, he should step down. And I'm not a doctor, James, as far as I know, you're not a doctor, but it does seem like the electorate is getting to that point. And I would point to a recent set of Emerson College polls of swing states and some states that you would not necessarily think of or put in the category of swing states, but including third-party candidates on the ballot. The lead in Arizona is Trump 46, Biden 36, so 10 points. In Arizona, 6 points in Pennsylvania, Trump 46, Biden 40, 3 in Wisconsin, 3 in Nevada, 2 in Virginia. James, we've had this discussion on the podcast a few times about whether the pressure on Biden is going to be so great that he will be convinced that he needs to step aside. And I have gone back and forth on whether it looks like he is going to brazen this out or not. And now I'm wondering again whether the pressure will be too great as he and his advisors start to grapple with the serious wipeout that the Democratic Party is potentially facing in November if he stays.
Well, his approval ratings are terrible, as they have been for a while, but he's not that far behind Donald Trump. And so if he's looking for a reason to hang in there, he's got a lot of leverage to do that, obviously, not just being the sitting president, but it's essentially all of his people who are the delegates to the upcoming convention in Chicago. So he may be close to the point where the pressure is intense from Democratic lawmakers on the Hill, donors, et cetera. But if he decides to hang in there, it's not clear that people who want an alternative will have the votes at the convention to eject him. So I'm not a doctor. I think we can all observe he has severe challenges when he's trying to communicate, respond to questions whenever he's speaking without a prepared text. So I think the sensible, appropriate thing is for Vice President Harris and the cabinet to demand some cognitive tests from esteemed independent doctors, and then based on those tests, act accordingly. He insists that he is still sharp enough to do the job. Most voters obviously disagree. We live in a very polarized time. One thing that now attracts overwhelming support in the country is the idea that he is too old to be president.
But that polarization seems to be what he is counting on. Kim, will give you the last word, but it seems to me that the Biden team's logic here is when it comes down to it, people are going to go into the voting booth and it will be a binary choice, which is the phrase we have heard a lot in recent years. You have to pick one of these guys or the other of these guys. And Biden still seems to think that when push comes to shove, people will decide they want to keep him in office, whatever their doubts about his age, instead of returning to a Donald Trump restoration to the White House. And I just don't know that that is accurate, because if you look at these polls, again, I'll go back to this Emerson one of Virginia. The Democratic senator in Virginia, Tim Kaine, is 10 points ahead of his Republican challenger, Hung Cao, 49% to 39%. So that is not a poll that suggests to me that Virginia, by demographics or by political persuasion, is turning back into a red state. It suggests to me that there is a fraction of voters who would be open to voting for a Democrat, might prefer a Democratic candidate in the White House, but who see President Biden in action and say to themselves, I cannot in good conscience vote to put this guy back in the White House for another 4 years until January of 2029, when he is going to be 86 years old. And so if that is the Biden logic, that if push comes to shove, it's a binary choice, he may be underestimating the number of people, the number of voters who have a sort of a conscience objection to voting for somebody that they worry is no longer competent or won't be by the end of his term.
The flaw in that calculation was the very beginning of the way you put it, which is when people show up at the voting booth. And this is what Democrats are extremely worried about and why it could well be that they push Joe Biden out of office. I think, as James was saying, we live in a very polarized society. I'm not necessarily sure that there's an enormous category of voters who are open to wholesale switching their allegiance from Democrat to Republican or Republican to Democrat. What there are is an enormous group of Democrats that right now are looking at Joe Biden and think you can't win. And I'm not enthusiastic about coming to vote for you in the first place. And it's the turnout question that is freaking Democrats out at the moment. If people are not showing up to vote for Joe Biden, then they are not there to vote for down ballot candidates either. And these are the things that don't show up in the polls, but that everybody who is in on the ground game understand matter more than anything. I mean, look, right now we have a scenario. We've been seeing shifting demographics across the country, and Donald Trump is making some real headway with voter categories that Republicans have struggled with, in particular Hispanic and Black voters, mostly the working class because of his working class pitch. But we've seen a transformation there and a change. That means that the Biden team is going to have to rely ever more heavily on its base and certain demographics that it views as a sure thing. One of those is young voters. Okay, they are looking at this guy and they have in their mind plenty other things to be doing that day, election day, than going out to vote for him at the moment, especially when you have so many people in the Democratic Party that are now publicly saying, we don't think our guy can win. This is the catch-22 Democrats are in. In order to push him out, they have to express doubt in his ability to win this election, and that is eroding turnout support for him every day. They need to make a decision about this soon so they can stop the bleeding one way or another, but I'm not quite sure. They still seem to be lacking the will.
If I could add, you were talking about that, I think it was the Emerson poll in Virginia. Tim Kaine, the incumbent senator there, obviously running well ahead of Biden. But if he's at 49%, that's potential trouble for him too. Hung Kao, I believe it ran unsuccessfully for a House seat in the last cycle, but very impressive guy. He spoke this week, former Navy SEAL, I believe. And for an entrenched incumbent, especially in that state, that's potential danger there for Kaine. He wants to be in the mid-50s.
Thank you, James and Kim. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button. And we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.